Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the fifth episode of the THC Expert Sessions. I feel some echo. No, now it's gone. Last episode was Tom State from Microsoft, an immense organization, and today we've got three guests, also from very big organization, but they've recently went through a hypergrowth. So I want to welcome Rob from TaxFix. I want to welcome Ebony from N26. And I want to welcome Marcel from Wallapop. Hung, I guess that it's better to give the stage to all of you. I hope you all enjoy it. Please, one little formality. If you have questions, don't post them in the chat, but in the ask a question toggle in the bottom. We'll try to address some of them during the episode if they're relevant, and the rest will be addressed in the very end. So have fun.
Great. Welcome, everybody. Oh my God, what is happening with that? Is that like a really bad sound quality? Let's do a quick sound check, everybody. Firstly, can everyone hear me okay? If you can, just let me know in the chat stream, because there was some like weird audio echo there. And I'd hate for us all to have a terrible experience if actually we don't have it properly there. Okay, so no one's saying anything. So I assume, okay, yeah, there's a few yeses in there. That's cool. All right, fine. Hopefully that's a little bit of a issue that's been corrected. But hey, this is a live show, everybody. These things happen. We don't know. We don't control the internet. And sometimes these things occur. So we're just going to carry on as best we can. Anyway, I'm delighted to be here. We're talking about hypergrowth, everybody. Hypergrowth, what is it? I think it's quite important for us to describe what the audience or what the panel thinks hypergrowth is, because all of us as recruiters are stressed, right? We're all hiring more than we need to. We all feel like, hey, we're scrambling around. So what is hypergrowth, and why is that different from the normal way to recruit? Let's go first with you, Rob. How would you define hypergrowth?
Right. Welcome all. Super excited to be here. Thank you for the invitation. And we actually went through a hypergrowth, or are still going through a hypergrowth. And for me, that is really what makes or breaks a company these days. You know, you have so many startups that have great ideas that, try and test them, that, put them out to the market, that, find that product market. Ultimately, from then onwards, this is the hypergrowth. Like, you have to go in and you have to really scale up the operations that you have to cover as many countries, as many possible avenues, as many new revenue routes, to really prove to the company, to the investors, to everybody that your company got what it takes to really dominate a certain industry, dominate certain area, and really ultimately be successful in what you do.
Okay, so you've mentioned a few things there, Rob. I just want to sit on them for a little bit, because it might then be attached to, say, the investments around where you're at with business. So hypergrowth tends to be a term that we use to describe a tech startup that has received, let's say, a significant round of investment, and the idea behind that investment is that you need to dominate an industry sector and hence hire a huge amount of people. So I think quite important to understand that, compared to, let's say, a company that's growing in a normal sense, but here you've got kind of like an artificial injection of like a large round of money, and then you've got to shoot forward. Okay, let's go with you on that, Ebony. How would you define hypergrowth? Have you got anything to add to my, mangled definition there?
Yeah, so I would probably define hypergrowth is a phase, right? It's a phase of rapid expansion. So typically it is, sort of assigned to startups, and the way that I kind of view it, based on my career, is where a company's going, or they're looking to achieve more than a 40% growth, right? So for me, you can visualize it as a massive wave. And so, this insanely high wall of water is basically what the companies have to ride in order to achieve this hyper growth. And so a lot of companies do fail, and it is a bumpy ride, but I would say most companies who are able to achieve it are those that are able to adapt and move really quickly, sort of to continue onwards. So Yeah, just rapid expansion essentially. You don't really tend to see hyper growth in, sort of the FANG companies, the bigger tech companies. They don't really define their growth as that. It's more steady. But yeah, normally where you see a cash injection for startups, that's where you find those companies need to go through a hyper growth phase.
I love the surfing analogy as well, Ebony. It is, maybe the energy is coming from the wave, right? So you've got to surf this thing or be crushed by it. I mean, that's the pressure. So you've got to execute maybe at a particular moment and take advantage of the surf, which is the investment money to do what you need to do. Okay, Marceau, let's go with you. Final thing in terms of defining hypergrowth. How would you kind of distinguish this from, normal, hey, we're a successful company, we're hiring a bunch of people. How would you define it?
I think from a recruitment point of view, it's really about quality, volume, at pace and at scale. So it's a complete shift in mentality, I think. And this is where, for example, at Wallapop, we've just embarked on that kind of movement. And it's really about hiring for potential, training your hiring teams to do so, training them for standardization, for really aiming for a bigger, and that also means that you need to invest differently. You need to invest in employee brands, you need to invest in the community, you need to invest in specific tools and a different way to do things, essentially.
Yeah, excellent stuff. And that's a great segue into, what we've got to do. So let's say we are in a situation where there's an investment event, let's say, and the pressure's on to us to say, okay, we've raised 100 million, whatever it is. You now need to go and recruit like an exponentially larger amount of people than you did before. Like we're often talking about several 100% more than the year before. It's not like an incremental increase. It really is like that. So from your experience, or if you don't have the direct experience, from your theory on it, what do you think a TA person in that position first needs to do? Like, the news has come in, you've raised this round, congratulations, have a drink. And now the next thing is we are under pressure to expand this company exponentially. What is the first thing or the first couple of things you need to do before you start jumping onto job boards and start, sending adverts out and harvesting candidates and stuff like that? Thoughts on this? Let's go with you first, Ebony, on that.
Yeah, so I mean, as I said before, typically companies who enter this phase are normally startups, right? And there's, on the odd occasion, they might have their processes and whatnot together, but typically they rarely have any defined processes. There's a lack of, well thought out candidate experience. They rarely have a strong market presence. There's lots of things that they need to align and prioritize. And, a lot of these things aren't defined, which means that you're already late to the party. And so the first thing I would suggest is just setting up the business and the expectations in order to be able to iterate quickly on how you hire, right? And so the business and the stakeholders, they need to be all aligned, and they need to also foster a can-do attitude. I definitely think you need to have the right recruiting team before that happens. Trying to scale up a recruiting team whilst trying to scale up an engineering team, you're basically, to use the water analogy again, you're basically working against the tide. It definitely helps having the ability of foresight regarding constraints such as interviewer burnout, which can definitely happen. I think it's just about prioritizing, what for the business is important, and what's going to get more candidates on board. And it very much depends on the industry, the size of the business, how much you're looking to scale as to, how you deal with that.
You know what, Ebony, one thing you said there was very interesting. You mentioned that the requirement to get the stakeholders involved, like very early on, you've got to have a good relationship, a strong relationship with the hiring manager tier before you go charging out. I think one of the things with recruiting is that it feels like a very external job sometimes, doesn't it? We're always like, let's send adverts out, let's use this sourcing tool, let's just externally face and bring people in. But maybe the first thing that we need to do in this moment is actually turn inward for a moment, even though that's against our instinct, and make sure we have absolutely nailed the internal stakeholder management piece down. Let's have a look at this. What's the approach to make sure that the stakeholders are happy with this type of mode shift? I can imagine I'm a CTO or CEO. I'm instructing recruiter, go and recruit. The last thing I want to do is spend like 3 weeks talking about employer branding or whatever. How do we negotiate with the internal managers that this is the right thing to do to have that internal stakeholder alignment? Let's go with you, Marceau, on that. What are your thoughts?
I think having a clear prioritization system that's pre-agreed on with the business and clearly communicated throughout the business will help a lot for that. Like in my experience, every hiring manager, every head of department will see their priorities as the main priority, of course, and I think it's super important to see the alignment there, and having this clear prioritization system at a business kind of level will help a lot.
What do you mean clear prioritization? I have this image that you've created a spreadsheet where everyone's requirements are on there and you're like ranking them as important or not important. Is that what it is?
No, I wouldn't say important or not important. Never. Like we have a prioritization system which is very simple. It's P1, P2, P3. Every role should be a P2 by default. It's for each hiring manager or leadership to justify a P1. So P1 is everything is going to break if this role isn't filled in X amount of time, and P3 is going to become a P2 if it isn't filled in X amount of time.
Right. So I love this. So it's basically trying to create a structured system to organize the priority list of the role. So it's not like the hiring manager that shouts the loudest or is the most personality. Sometimes that can happen, right? Like it's hard to deal with someone who's like very aggressive. You want to not have that. So maybe you end up like doing extra work for that person. No. What you have to do is to roll out a universal way to rank the priority of the roles and map that against, if you like, the business value, So the remind me again, P1 is business critical. So in other words, unfilled means lots of things.
The way to see it is to start with P2. Every role should be P2, which is normal priority. It should be filled within whatever is your usual time to hire, let's say 2-3 months for most organizations. It's for the hiring manager to justify a P1. So P1 is, it could mean that the whole TA team is hand down on that role, because if this role isn't filled, it puts the organization in danger.
Got it. So I understand it. Default is P2. So this is normal recruiting behavior. You create a new role. It generally is a P2. But if a manager is like complaining and saying this needs to be escalated, they've got to make some sort of business case for that to happen. And we need to structure the business case in order for that to result in a decision that is correct for the business rather than, a bilateral chat between you and them. Okay, that's fantastic. Rob, I noticed you're nodding along there. I wanted to bring you in on this. Is this like something you've done, or is this like an approach that is familiar to you? And if so, is it the similar type of approach, or do you have a different kind of angle or different flavor from what Marceau has described?
For us, we actually taken a very similar route to do this, and from the very beginning, it was super important to actually get the business involved, bought in. Like HyperGrowth is not just a TA thing, we are in the driver's seat, but it's for the business to really ride it with us, if we use that analogy. And we also have created 4 priority levels, to say which is the most important roles in the company. Those are very limited. There's only a few of them. Those are being bi-weekly decided in a C-level meeting. So I get together with the C-level, say where is the most impact on the company, what is critical, what needs to be filled, and everything else is then priority, kind of the medium. And then we go to the lower priority levels. And I think what is interesting about this, we have also decided that then the TA partnership also works in a different way. So the lower the priority is, the less of the TA time you will get, and the more the tasks are on the hiring team to actually do it. So they might be involved in more feedback giving to the candidates, scheduling the roles themselves, actually maybe aligning with the rest of the interviewing team to relieve the TA, enable us to really focus on the critical roles and spend the time where the focus is needed.
Okay, I love the direction you're pointing this towards, Robert. So 2 things that are really interesting, folks. Number 1, it's a dynamic situation. So you can't just say, hey, here are the priorities and that's it. you have to regularly interact with the C-level or the top-level management to say, what are the priorities this week? So you kind of do it in that rhythm. And if you're not involved in that meeting, or that meeting doesn't exist, you need to create that meeting so that they know that this is a weekly rhythm, or whatever rhythm you've decided. But I would say no less than a month, right? It has to be really as up to date as possible, so you can align on priorities. And the second thing you mentioned that was super interesting is that it sounds like you've broken down the recruiter activities to say, okay, if you want the recruiter to do 100% of effort, it needs to be priority one, in Marcel's terms, P1 level job. If you want some recruiter help, it can be P2, it's fine. But you know what? You've got to handle the feedback to the candidates. You reject that interview or something like this. And then I guess it descends down to wherever it is, where maybe it's completely hands off, where you say, look, we get it. If we find the person, we'll hire it. But generally speaking, we can't guarantee resources for you on this particular project.
That approach also then requires a lot of training. We provided a lot of kind of framework for the business to, like, what are these steps? Like, what do you have to do here? What good looks like in this way, because, give the role out completely. It also requires a lot of upskilling on the business side.
Yeah, so we'll talk about sort of that requirement in a bit, where, if that relationship between recruiter and the managers or the assessors, we obviously need to equip them with the capability of doing what we've asked them to do. So that's super, super interesting. Let's have a look at how we break the recruiter job down, because that's an interesting exercise for us to do, isn't it? I would imagine the hiring managers generally don't have a clue. Like, candidates magically appear, right? It's like, boom, that's it. It's in there. Great. But how do you actually start breaking it down to say, look, recruiter does these activities? Robert, I will speak to you about this, but I want to bring Ebony in on this to see whether this is an activity that you've got involved in, kind of to break down the recruiter role, to say, look, here are the different components of the task the TA team are currently doing, and bringing that to a bit more transparency and openness in the business.
I think it's difficult to do depending on the setup. So I'm used to kind of working with 360 recruiting teams. So we have a squad of coordinators, a squad of sourcers, a squad of recruiters, and by trade they would all do different things within the process. So I think that's a difficult thing to educate the business about. So I wouldn't really go into that much granularity with the business. But what I would do, aside from that, actually, is work on standardizing the processes across all of the domains, so that everything makes sense, and so that they don't have to keep asking about what are the different bits within a process here, and what's the difference here. When you're in the process of hypergrowth, you don't really have the luxury of time. You don't have the luxury to be able to sit down and, I guess, have different processes for different roles in different domains. And so for me, it's less about breaking down the recruiter responsibilities or duties, and actually having something a bit more standardized, so that the business can understand, a bit clearer where the bottlenecks are. So I know that's not necessarily answering your question, but
No, it absolutely answers. It actually brings to surface an interesting phenomena, because how do you organize your TA team might inform. It's part of the strategy, isn't it? So from what you're saying, Ebony, like if you've gone down the specialization route, where you've maybe got a centralized function, you've got a bunch of people who do sourcing, you've got employer branding people here, you've got coordinators there, maybe people that do interviews or candidate management or what have you, then maybe the approach where you're saying where you're parceling out time per recruiter isn't the best fit. Maybe it's a better fit if you have what's called a life cycle recruiter, right? That runs a job from end to end. Maybe that's more appropriate. So one of the first decisions we might need to make as TA then is, how do we make the decision to be this style of thing? Because that will inform the strategy, also will inform the kind of recruiters we recruit. Because let's say we go down, everyone's an all-rounder, that's a legit way to recruit for this. But it might mean that, you can't just hire a sourcer who's an amazing sourcer, because they are not interested or not capable of doing all of the other things. So how do we make that call? Like, is it a strategic decision to make, or does it just emerge as a result of what we were doing before? Any thoughts on this, like open contribution, folks?
Ebony, do you want to start? Because
Go ahead.
now, for me, that definitely is a very strategic choice. Like that is something you should do from the very, very get-go. Like that ultimately going to drive so much of what you do in recruitment, and the way you do recruitment, the way you business partner, the way you assign capacity to your team. And it's ultimately, I don't think there's one size fit all. Last week I was speaking to somebody from SumUp. For those who know, it's a very interesting Berlin scale up as well. And they have super decentralized recruitment team that is just based in the squads. The recruitment reports directly to kind of the business unit owner rather than to central, head of recruitment in any way. And that gives them super different advantage to what, in my case would be a rather centralized recruitment model where, similar to Ebony, have sources, employee branding, managers, coordinators, and the recruiter is a business partner, but it's super centralized in the way we want to drive it. But it's, there's no science fit all, and it's really have to listen to what your business needs, how does your business operate, what is the culture, what are also the roles that you'll be hiring for, what are the biggest challenges, and really adapt that setup and the strategy to that environment.
Okay, so this is an interesting thing to sit on just a little while, because let's say it is a strategic decision, Rob, and we're sitting there making a call. Do we centralize and specialize like you two have, or do we decide to decentralize and put, as I understand how some of them have done it, they've just got full cycle recruiters sitting in a team. So you have a product recruiter sitting in the product team. They do everything for product, employer branding, sourcing, interviewing, everything, boom, that's it. And then they just push it into the business. So what are the benefits of one compared to the other? What are the pros and cons? Any thoughts on this, everyone?
For us at Wallapop, we took the route of having T-shaped recruiters essentially. So they all own an area of the business, and they also own a key pillar of our TA strategy. So for example, we've got a recruiter who's responsible for sourcing, and they're going to lay out the strategy for the whole team and be accountable for it. And it's going to be the same for employer brand, for process optimization, candidate experience, while owning a business area. And I think this allows a lot of flexibility for the business. It allows to be able to move quick and essentially just fill business requirements quicker. And also it's good learning opportunities for the individuals.
So that sounds like another framework, another structure that could be used. Someone should write a blog post on this. What is the seriously, I want to see diagrams on this. I've not seen anybody produce any content which diagrammatically sort of outlines what are these options. But I think it will be useful. So if anybody listening here, if you fancy into brain food, write that blog. But anyway, the T-shaped thing, I love it, because you basically, the T is going to be to the business, right? But the stalk of the T is going to be the specialized dimension of recruitment that you need this person to be the owner of. Okay. Same question though, Amoso, how did this emerge? Did it emerge just because of a path dependency from the past, or was it a decision that, you analyzed choices and thought, okay, we're going to go for this one?
This is something we worked out together with the team. Actually, for us, it was really important to take into account where their passion lie, their strengths, their interests. We were a very small team, by the way. It was 3 of us up until very recently. So it kind of went that way, and also we kind of reflected on what we've done. So in 2020, it was a team of 3, and we managed to hire over 100 people. It is a system that worked really well for us, so we decided to go further, to further implement.
Right. So that's another thing that's really interesting to speak about. There is an existing recruiting team when this wave happens, right? We haven't just materialized into the wave. There's an existing group of people that'll help you get there. So it's very important that they're aligned and motivated to do what they need to do. It's very hard to tell someone you're no longer doing X because of the structure that we've got here. So we have to take that input into consideration. even if I can imagine that may mean that there's a few great people you might need to lose because they no longer fit in to the strategy that you've decided to go down. So it's not necessarily a case where it can be compatible for instance, you would move to a centralized system because you think that's the way to scale. You got this person who loves being a 360 recruiter. Probably that person may not ideally fit into any of those, that new structure again. Okay, really interesting. I'll sit on this strategic decision again because I want to just explore how people come to decide what the structure is. Ebony, I just go to you on this. How much of it was emergent? How much was it actually a strategic thing? And I'm not like any judgment as to one thing or the other. I think a lot of good things are emergent rather than strategic. So I wanted to know sort of how did N26 or even Global before then work to a centralized system? What was the genesis of that?
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, I'm just going through a process of restructuring the team at N26, actually.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I mean, I've only been here a month, but yeah, there's a lot to do, and we want to get to a place where we work a little bit more agile and become a little bit more centralized. But there's things that we need to do in order to get that set up. But at Glovo, it was all centralized, and it was purposefully done, right? And so we took on board what's the best option for the team, because going back to your previous point, I think it's really important that the team are part of the decision when it comes to figuring out, do we centralize, do we not decentralize? Because a lot of people who do decentralize end up reporting to people who don't really have a background in recruitment. And so when it comes to defining KPIs and personal development plans, that's a lot more trickier, which means that you're going to end up hemorrhaging loads of people, right? Sorry, go ahead.
No. I want you to continue, but really important point. Decentralization may not be great for a career progression, right?
Right.
I'm thinking. Is that right?
Yeah, exactly. So, but yeah, I mean, you know, just going back to your question, it was a formulated plan with regards to how we were set up at Glovo. We basically just built on it, and even when I joined, you know, the setup was pretty much there. So we had team leads working with specific domain leads, and those team leads basically had squads of recruiters, sourcers, and a coordinator, and that was pretty much centralized. And you know, we had it aligned to product or data or software engineering. It's a very, very general structure, but for us it worked, and that meant that when we hired more people into the team, if we needed to grow the engineering team a little bit more, when we hired more recruiters, it meant that we could just plug them in, you know, to the different pillars, as opposed to, you know, figuring out where they would go. So for us, that worked, and it was very, very, very much formalized. So
yeah, very interesting. It's fascinating to observe the pros and cons of this, and you know, as the idea that you need to care for your internal department, I think is maybe underrated. Certainly, I underrated it because you know, we're all human beings, and to do this very difficult challenge of, you know, suddenly doing times 10 of what you did before, you need to have a highly motivated team to do that. Yeah. Final thing on this structure: is it a decision made within TA? I mean, is it our decision to make how we structure it, or how much do we involve the business in that decision?
I mean, I think if there's anyone that's going to be an expert on how to structure the team, it should be the person who's leading the team, right? Because they're the proxy. They're the proxy between the team and what's going to make them happy and keep them engaged, but also what the business needs are. So I definitely think that it should be a decision made predominantly on TA's part, but that's just my view. Sorry. Yeah, that's just my view.
Is that you being too busy, Ebony? Feel free to take the call. You know, that's totally fine. We're listening. No, that's great. It's great to understand a little bit about the thought process on the structure. Let's say we've decided on the structure. We've kind of got people situated in the right place, and we're kind of moving forward. We've also had the conversation with the hiring managers. The dialogue is sorted. We're ready to kind of go. You know, we've had this period of doing it. We do actually need to go external. What are the ways in which you need to aggressively expand the talent pipeline that you need to recruit for? I'm guessing most of these people that we're hiring for are likely to be product engineering types. It was already very difficult. Pre-hypergrowth, it was already like massively difficult to do. How do you then decide, okay, we're going to times 10 the pipeline? Seems to me like something that isn't realistic. So how do we do that? Any thoughts?
I guess there's maybe two ways to look at this problem. One is to actually upskill the interviewers and make sure that they feel comfortable, that they feel like they can actually do this job. They know what they're doing. They can, turn into the interview, and they can do a great job selling your company, asking great questions, providing you with feedback, being able to fill a scorecard, do it on time. But also on the second hand is that you have to also provide that structure for them. You have to really go deep into structured interviewing, like map up competencies, be very clear from the very beginning, like this is what we're doing at this stage, this is what the skills we're assessing here. We are not interested in A, B, and C, we are only interested in E and F. And this is all the questions that can help you there, and deliver that information even before we start hiring. So whoever jumps into this interview, because in a hyperscale, especially for tech, you have like multiple interviewers that can do the same stage. So sometimes, person A interviews, sometimes person B, sometimes person C, and to make sure that whoever jumps on that interview knows exactly why they're there, what they need to do, what is they're being kind of asked to provide, and can very easily find that structure framework to do their job, basically.
I love that, Robert, because you're saying that firstly, we need to make sure we're not losing any diamonds that come into the pipeline, right? Because if you've got like an inadequately trained hiring manager tier, they may not know what they're looking for. They may fail to sell the job properly. They may make erroneous decisions. And you've worked really hard. Recruiters have worked really hard to bring this person to the pipeline, and you lose them or lose her. That's not acceptable. So again, internal facing, right? You got to go back and think, what is the competency level of the hiring managers? How do we make sure that they're equipped to sort of assess in the right way? How do you make sure that they are assessing in a standardized way? Because it strikes me that we probably should have some sort of scorecard or some sort of way in which, what you don't want, I guess, folks, is the tech leader comes out and say, yeah, not strong enough. I mean, constantly like dismissing people. It's like you need to actually have a structured way of doing it. What is the sort of approach to developing this and rolling it out? Because I'm thinking that at some point this didn't exist, and it now needs to exist. So let's think about that as a change plan. Any thoughts on this, Ebony or Mosso?
Yeah, I would say one of the things that I think worked really well for me in the past is actually having, and just to give some color on this, when you're moving so fast and you're trying to measure the success of your processes and you're trying to iterate and you've got different domains and different things you're recruiting for, it's really difficult to build a blueprint and then standardize across the board. But it's also really difficult to get consensus as to what is the right way to iterate and what are the right things to measure and what are the right things to change, right? And so in order to do that, what we did is at Glovo is we actually built out an interview committee where we'd have, sort of 3 or 4 people who would come in every week. It was a static audience from different domains, and we would discuss some of the challenges, we would discuss some of the data, some of the bottlenecks, and they would make decisions on behalf of their specific pillars or domains, and we would basically come to a consensus within that committee, and we would agree to roll it out across the business, depending on the change, right? If it was a huge process change, we would pilot it maybe with one pipeline and then assess the data and then roll it out based on the results. Or if it was a small change, like a scorecard amendment, for instance, that would be agreed in that forum, and we would go out and do it, and the business would know that we've had the conversation with all of the people that we needed to, and we would make sure we communicated it effectively, and we would make the change.
That's really cool. Isn't that a great idea to have like a weekly thing that you like, almost a quorum, people come in? Who comes in? This is not, as I understand it, this is not necessarily TA people. This is people from the business, right?
Yeah, stakeholders essentially, but you want the engineers who are doing the interviews to be involved in the decision making. So it would essentially be a couple of engineers from each domain. We also want to have a layer of leadership so that we know that the decisions that we're making are applicable to, kind of what the leadership team need and what they see would be in sort of good alignment with what we're doing. So a couple of engineering leaders, I would always go on a weekly basis, and then I would also have somebody from, say, the co-org team, just in case it was a process change, and also some of the recruiters, because I didn't have full visibility on everything that was happening. They were on the front lines, and so they could come in and also sort of give their views and figure out between engineering and recruiting, is this going to work? And so, yeah, it's kind of a mixed bag, but everybody who is involved in the process from sort of top down needs to be there, at least one representative.
You know, what I'm hearing from you here, Ebony, is that it's that sense of involvement, isn't it? That's important. Like the stakeholders aren't just recipients of our great frameworks or our amazing advice. They've got to be fully participants in whatever is agreed. Yeah. We could advise them and nudge it, and maybe do some choice architecture or whatnot. But they ultimately need to feel invested in the outcome that's produced. Otherwise, they're not going to do it. So very, very good. I've had a kind of terrible thought, but let's imagine there is a manager you suspect actually is not adhering to the plan. What do we do there? Like, so, maybe obviously I've been scarred from previous experience here of a hiring manager. This really rejects everything. What do you do there? Like, you got a feeling that this person literally is a problem in the hiring process. How do we turn this person around? What is the mechanism to do that? Any thoughts on that, Marceau? I'm not sure. Again, I don't want to land anybody in it. So if you don't have the example to mind, don't say anything. But if you've got a theory, then I'd love to hear it.
I've got loads of examples of that. I think data speaks for itself. If the person is a problem, you will see it in the pipeline. And I think we are lucky to work with this kind of people that understands data really well and responds to data really well. And I think this always facilitates the dialogue. And also, I think having a standardized process across the organization gets you the buy-in that you need to kind of change minds of people or influence them anyway.
Any other thoughts on this? Like problem hiring manager, or you suspect there is a problem hiring manager from high level data, simply no hires are happening despite the fact pipeline's in there. How do you like determine it is a hiring manager issue, and what do you do about it?
One of the interesting data points is actually candidate feedback. And this is something that can be very, very specific, that goes very deep. It can be very personal. And I think this is a wonderful way for TA to show up saying, look, this is all the surveys we sent about your interviews. This is what the candidates are saying. And people are like, I can't believe I come across like this, but something has to change, and they take a real, at least in our case, ownership of the experience and of the feedback. And through this, we can use it as a tool to say, okay, well, maybe something's not working. Let's actually go deeper. Let's address some other things, and can actually smooth out that process and kind of bring them into the fold in a way.
Yeah,
brilliant.
I definitely agree. I would say there's two things that I would look at. One is definitely the candidate feedback, and there are really, really great tools on the market where you can sort of align them to get feedback on just the candidates that the hiring managers interviewed, even anonymous feedback, right? But then I would also suggest, and it might be a little bit advanced, but it's interview conversion rates, right? And so, I've used Greenhouse for the last X amount of years, and using a tool such as Lookat, you can actually assess and see how many yes and no's the hiring manager is giving, and then you can compare it to other hiring managers, and you can also share that data with the business. And you can even use a traffic light system to say, all of these hiring managers have got a relatively healthy yes/no percentage. It will be glaringly obvious, and that's the information that you would take to the business and say,
Hang about. What about jobs that are easier to say yes to? Like there's going to be loads of people, what I mean? Like I can imagine some person who's like recruiting a Perl developer or something like that, and it's impossible. It's like he's going to know a lot of people. Like it doesn't happen. So how do you make sure, look at the job difficulty? How do you look at even the attitude of the market? Sometimes can have a little bit of impact here as well. So how fair is a universal traffic light system? And is there a way in which you can kind of calibrate that a little bit to take into account the conditions of the market per the job?
You can. That's super granular, but I think as a hiring manager, if you have given, it doesn't matter what the domain is or what the market is. I think that's all relatively subjective. But if you are a hiring manager and you have previous experience of hiring, there should be a point in your process where you say, okay, I've rejected 100% of these candidates. We need to iterate on either the job specification, the requirements, et cetera, et cetera. And even if that's not happening, that's a data point still. And that's where you can say to the business, look, there is something not right here inherently, whether or not it's to do with the job specification, et cetera, et cetera. That's also on the hiring manager. And so iterating on the search itself is part of the cross-functional collaboration between the recruiter and the hiring manager. And if that's not happening, that will also show up in the data, right? It sounds, maybe I'm not explaining it correctly, but there's definitely a way that you can get the data that you need in order to make an informed decision.
Yep. Thoughts on that, Robert, before we move on to the next point?
I also agree with Ebony. I think that one data point is maybe inconclusive itself, but it's a conversation starter. Yeah. If you feel like there's something off, then you dig into conversion rates, you dig into maybe some other metrics, and then you build a bigger picture. So I think just itself, it's maybe not the metric or the traffic light itself could be like you're doing a terrible job by saying, maybe there's other factors, but most of the time when you look at it, then you can zoom in and look at that and just say, okay, well, I think this is why this is happening.
Mm.
Yeah, and it actually you might be able to provide support to that manager if you surface up a situation that no one is aware of, like subconscious stuff. Didn't I read someplace that the timing of the interview, according to the time of the day or even the day of the week, actually has an impact on whether it's a yes, no. Yeah. So what if you have a hiring manager not aware of this, but habitually schedules interviews at a certain point where chances are it's going to be a no? Then you might think, this dude's, serotonin levels in the wrong place. He's got to be doing his interviews at 9 a.m. and suddenly the conversion rate's high. So, stuff like that is going to be super interesting to track, even though, as you say, Ebony, I think you mentioned the granularity of it. That is super granular. But I just wonder whether nowadays, with everything shifting to remote and everything being automated in terms of scheduling and stuff, we might be able to pick out some of those data points to say, Rob tends to do his interviews at 4 o'clock in the evening, 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And the no rate at that point seems to be higher than when it does at 1. That's not on Rob. He's just not aware of it. He's just doing his thing. It's subconsciously, he needs a third coffee or something. Okay, super interesting. We talked a little bit about tooling, and it's worth talking about the toolkit also. I'm talking about technology here because you can't do this on a spreadsheet, or at least God help you if you are trying. What do you need? I'm a big fan of spreadsheets, by the way. Hey, I think you can hire 100 people on a spreadsheet, but beyond that, you're in trouble. So what needs to be in place in order for you to do the hyperscaling? I'm going to say, of course, you already have an ATS. Let's ignore that for a point now. I think most of the things that we know on ATSs are fine. What are the additional stuff that you need in order for this to happen? Thoughts on that, Marso?
I think before considering the actual tool, I think it's super important to understand your needs, current needs and challenges, and upcoming needs and challenges. And I think before scoping anything out there, it's very important to understand that and reflect on that with the whole team. No tool is perfect. We know this. I think the only constant in what we do is change as well, so we need to be aware of this as well. But in my experience, a lot of the times, a lot of tools that I've chose or been involved in the decision making, we've kind of really focused on the current state of things, or also looked at other organizations, for example, to make decisions around tool. And I definitely don't think this is the right thing to do.
Let me just actually take another step back. Thanks, Marso. You've given me a thought on this. How do we make the decision on what tools to use? Does someone just come up with a brainwave and say, "Hey, I've just found this," or is there a kind of a more strategic or structured way for us to do this selection? And what type of category of tool do you require for this hyperscale? Again, I'm not expecting anybody to have the final answer, but I'd be interested to know in your own experience, how did tool adoption actually occur in the experiences that you have? Thoughts on that, Robert?
For us, actually, there was an interesting one on tax because we sort of realized halfway through Hyperscale that we have information jungle. That there are so many tools and so many different systems, and just information is here and there and there, and every team introduces, whatever tools they think is right, but we have like no coherent one across TaxWeek. So we put quite a lot of effort on trying to be conscious about what tools we're using. To actually not to get there. And it resolved in a framework that we try to, before we introduce any tool, we try to really analyze what are the features of these tools. Are those features really address the problems that we have, or are we being just upsell a feature from a sales advisor because they think we need that, but we actually really, when we think about it, don't need it. And then when the features match, then we make a conscious decision against the tools that we're currently using. Does this make sense? Will this integrate? Will this work? Or this actually going to contribute to the kind of the noise that we are using? But I think that is just a kind of interesting way I potentially do is just break it down to like the feature level and decide on that.
Who does that? Is that you, or is that like because I think the bigger companies, some enterprise businesses have people that buy tools, don't they? And they that's their job, like full time, look at like stuff that recruiting teams can use. But I'm guessing in Hyperscale that person may not exist, or at least not until the point where it's you've already got to a massive size. Like who then brings that framework together? Is it a leadership thing to do, or is it something you can delegate to one of the team members, let's say?
I think it needs to be both.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, so maybe no hard and fast rules on it. You just got to have some sort of way to decide.
I think
the problem. What are you trying to solve? And you need your subject matter experts on this. So you need a team for this. It's definitely a decision that lies in TA. But I think the ownership is on the whole team.
Yeah. I think when it comes to the preferred tools for the recruiters, for how they search, how they prospect. I mean, I'm not too religious about it. Whatever works for them is fine. But when it comes to, the systems and how we process applications and how we, like the ATS side of things, and then what we need for reporting and how we need the data to be, the integrity of the data to be, that's kind of, sort of a group decision, or it's something that the TA leads would work on, like, Greenhouse and the candidate experience tool and how we CRM and how we pipeline and all of that good stuff, because actually that affects the output, which is what the leadership team need to see, which is the data and the reporting, right? And so that the back end side of things, process wise, I think that kind of needs to be done by not the leadership team, but certainly needs to be done by TA leads for sure. But as far as what the recruiters want to use to find, to find candidates, it's to each their own, I think.
Yeah, fantastic. Let's leave the tool thing with final question. What is a tool you would recommend? I mean, hyperscaling, there's people out there that they're going to email me, say, oh, give me a recommendation. I have no clue. So you need to tell me, like, what tool would you recommend for what function? Thoughts on this? Let's go with you first, Robert.
For me, maybe just one, I don't know, maybe I think it's outside of the box. Maybe you can correct me. It's not. I don't know if you guys heard of Talent Wall, especially the one that work with Greenhouse. I see some nodding. So this, beyond, tools like, I don't know, Calendly or DocuSign that really automate and help you. I think this was one of the one for us that was very interesting because it was super easy to implement, super easy to use, but had a massive impact on us being business partners and managing our stakeholders really, really well. And it really helps to visualize the pipeline, visualize how long the candidate's been, what is the feedback, what do they need to, go, and enables hiring managers to take ownership, also accountability, like drive recruitment. They don't wait on recruiters to provide reports. They can go in and kind of very easily see where they are, and also read very simple analytics like conversion rates, like, like time to hire, and then just taking the one-on-one weekly alignments between recruitment and business to like a next level for us.
Yeah, perfect. So Talent Wall, like a transparency tool that helps hiring managers get the information. It takes off the reporting load from the recruiting team. Fantastic. Okay, how about you, Ebony? Give me a tool.
Okay, it's really boring, but it's a reporting tool, and I would say Looker. And the only reason for that is, I mean, as I say, I've used Greenhouse for a number of years, and all of the data gets stored in Redshift, and then you can basically put it into Looker, and you can build any report that you want, as I mentioned before, interview conversion rates. But there's also, I think when it comes to the business suggesting we want to hire X amount of people, there's a way that you can not push back, but there's a way that you can manage expectations using reporting, and that's by reverse engineering the numbers to get to even the top of funnel to figure out if you have the capacity in the team, the recruiting team, to be able to physically achieve these numbers. And the data doesn't lie. And for me, I think data wins all arguments. And so that's what I would suggest.
That's totally excellent. I had some risks when I was typing in Looker, and I'm thinking, what is my auto predictor going to generate here? Thankfully, Looker.com actually is a software, so well done on buying that domain. Okay, how about you, Marcel? You got a tool? It doesn't matter how cool or sexy it is. Like, what is the thing you think, hey, this is damn useful, people should use it?
I think this one is pretty sexy, actually. We signed with them a couple of months ago. It's called HyperGrowth. It's a sourcing tool. And what's really good about them...
What do you say? Hire tool, do you say?
HyperGrowth.
Yep, I got it.
So they're a good sourcing tool comparable to their competitors. But what's good about them is that they have a good market data part. They also have salary information for some markets as well. And it's quite interesting because you can share that with your hiring teams, with your hiring managers. And for us, it looks very promising at the moment. There's also a section for sourcing for diversity, which again looks promising.
Yeah, fantastic. So just for an FYI for everyone watching this, I don't think any of us are paid by any of these companies. Just to let you know, although I do know the CEO of Talent Wall. I used to work with her back in the day in my very first recruiting job. I sat next to her. So hi, Jo Avon, in case she's watching at this point. Anyway.
Yeah, they should be paying me because every single event I'm being invited to, I'm like, Talent Wall is great. I think I should get
maybe you should just wear the shirts or something, Okay, listen, we're like really coming to the end of the show. So I wanted to, there's so much to talk about, isn't there? Like, and I don't think we're going to be able to get everything in the conversation right away. We did ask for questions to come in. So there's been a bunch of questions asked. So we're going to go to the questions now. If you do have any questions for these guests, folks, now is the time to ask them in the Ask Questions section because we're going to spend the rest of the show on those. Let's go to the first one. We've got here, I think, from Gabriella. Gabriella saying, could you possibly share some insights about the size and structure of the recruiting team? How do you adjust the TA team for HyperGrowth? So I think we might have answered that already. But the size issue is quite interesting. So in other words, is there a ratio where, in terms of like the requirement to the size of the TA team? I mean, did you calculate that? Is there a number, or is that some kind of false metric? Anybody?
It's hard to calculate, but we gave it a shot, and we kind of ended up at recruiter will fill 3 roles per month. So this is kind of where we assess, obviously there's different levels of kind of difficulty, but on average going to be 3 roles a month. And then from then, if you know how many roles you have a year and then a year ahead, you can very easily break it down and build how many recruiters do you need and break it down into a team.
Right. So you've just spat out and I love this, Robert, you've spat out a clear number. You're saying one recruiter should be hiring 3 roles per month on average. Yeah, Ebony agreeing with that. That's interesting. I have no idea whether that's a good number, but and for tech, that sounds pretty strong to me in terms of the volume. So three hires per month for a tech recruiter. Okay, excellent. Let's move on to the next question here. I think this is from Michael. Michael's asked 3 questions, actually, rather cheeky of you, Michael, but he's gone with the ABC formulation. Let's try and answer them all. How has the COVID era talent market affected HyperGrowth strategy? In other words, how has it affected sourcing? How has it affected comp? How has it affected relocation? So pre-COVID, you might have done this thing. Now post-COVID, what are you doing? What are the big changes? Thoughts on this? Ebony, go to you.
I mean, when I was at Glovo, and as I say, I haven't been at N26 for long, but nothing really changed, I'll be honest. Even our projected hires didn't change even after the COVID situation started. We still kept to the same targets. We still kept to the same sourcing strategy. We still kept the same compensation. The only difference for us was relocation, because obviously nobody can move. And so we had to take a look at the policy, and obviously we couldn't hire people to move to Barcelona or Poland, which was where the second tech hub was. So we basically just figured out a different type of contracts that we could offer, sort of freelance, and gave them that. And when obviously the borders opened up, we just said to folks, we'll sort the relocation out after. And we did slightly adjust as well the work from home policy, but apart from that, that was it.
Interesting. And engineering, I think companies are hiring engineering, probably, I wouldn't say of least affected, but it's a different kind of impact, isn't it? Because of the general distributed nature, usually of a lot of the work, always difficult anyway. The comp was always high anyway. So very interesting. I want to sit on this for a little while, because particularly on the compensation side, engineers previously, you have to pay them a ton to arrive in your city. Now potentially they could work from anywhere. Has that impacted the compensation strategy in your businesses? Go to you with this, Marceau.
So no, it hasn't impacted our compensation strategy as of yet. We may have to adjust, actually. This is something that we're reflecting on.
Adjust up or down?
I would say there's no going down, I think, in what we do, but one can be hopeful.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
We've seen two trends. We've seen more talent available naturally because of people being let go, but we've also seen people being reluctant to move as well because of uncertainty and not knowing where businesses are going. So it's been, from an engagement point of view, we've seen changes, and it's been quite weird.
Yeah, so this is the bifurcation of the market, right? People who are on the market are obviously very active, happy to chat with you, or people who are at risk, same, happy to have this conversation. And I would say even candidates that are not looking are still happy to have the conversation, because they like to hedge now. And they're thinking, okay, it makes sense to me to make friends with these recruiters. So great time for us to spend time building networks, building communities, getting those relationships built now, because you're going to need them later. However, at the same time, the people who are in situ are very reluctant to take a risk, and that's totally understandable also. Why would you move unless there was a really strong reason to do so, or unless the hiring company had a stronger proposition in the post-pandemic world than your current sort of secure job. So challenging in different respects there. Let's ask you on this as well, Robert. Talking about compensation, I'm thinking, okay, jobs going remotely, how do we pay for that? Do we pay Berlin salaries if we're hiring in Minsk, or do we push it down to say, okay, listen, cost of living in Minsk is this. We're going to pay you above market rate, but it's not like the Berlin salary. How is the policy with you guys right now in TaxFix?
That is actually a really difficult one, because originally we said to ourselves, okay, we're going to keep our current salary. So no matter where you live, you're going to get a Berlin salary. Obviously, whenever you can move, you move to Berlin, you have a salary already. But as the situation isn't really subsiding, we're getting people that, I don't know, like, for example, live in the countries with smaller cost of living that are earning a fortune because they're earning a Berlin salary, or people are living with a higher cost of living, and they're like, guys, this is really not enough. So we're now trying to adjust them based on the cost of living, but there is no really hard policy yet, because it's very hard to, like, what kind of metrics do you use? So we try to listen to the market and make them adjustable, but ultimately we don't want to build a remote company. So everybody, as soon as moves to Berlin, they will obviously get a Berlin salary here. Yeah,
so basically you could make it conditional, modulate the salary in terms of current location, cost of living, calculate it in, but then say, you know what, when the time comes, you move, and then we elevate the salary. So there's one potential solution. By the way, if anybody has a cost of living calculator globally, that would be a really useful tool to have. So anybody listening, if you have it, share it. Go ahead.
Can I sidebar something just very quickly, just with regards to the COVID era question of compensation? So one trend that I have seen is kind of a dark side of this. One trend that I have seen is companies taking advantage of the layoffs and people being on the market. And so they've been, potentially lowballing candidates, which is obviously not a good thing to do, but taking advantage of people who aren't in employment. I would just, So all the TA people out listening, please don't do that. It's really bad for the industry, and it's going to affect attrition for any business that does do it, because people will end up leaving a year later when the market comes back up. So just a side note.
Right, and that side note is how we must end the show, folks, because we're out of time. Sorry for the people who asked questions and I didn't get to them. I do beg your pardon, but we've hit the limit. Hope everyone has enjoyed the show. I've certainly had a great conversation with these three marvelous guests, and I hope that you'll continue to follow the channel here. This is a fascinating conversation. Definitely, we could go and have more time spent on it, and lots of really interesting things learned.
Thank you, Hung. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
If anyone wants to reach out to me on LinkedIn with any questions that didn't get answered, or you want more detail, feel free to do that. But really great session. Thank you for hosting, Hung.
Yes, likewise.
I have some problems with the internet, so can you hear me, guys, or not?
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks everyone for being here. As you've seen, we've shared our link to the community on Slack in the comment section. I also want to invite you to sign up for the 6th episode, which will happen on March the 11th. Of course, Hung will be there, and he'll be interviewing Becky McCullough, VP of Global Recruiting for HubSpot. And lastly, we have our Tech Hiring Conference, which is coming up in March on the 13th and the 20th. More information soon, and also you can see here again in the chat the expert session registration form. Thanks everyone, and again, please add our guests on LinkedIn if you have some additional questions. I hope I may be so free to say so, and we hope to welcome you the next time. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much.
Thank you all. Have a good day.
Bye-bye.